everyone, to the first Conservation Connector of 2025. I'm Cynthia Canner, Executive Director of Prairie State Conservation Coalition. And before we get started, I want to just have you mark down March 31st, which will be our next Conservation Connector, and that will be on connecting your land trust and other conservation organizations with your legislatures. So on with sensible salting. Less salt, please. Protect our natural environment with winter best practices. And we're so fortunate to have a true expert in this, Hanna Miller, who coordinates the Conservation Foundation's Salt Smart Collaborative Program and the Chicago Area Waterways Chloride Working Group. And of course, we've had some bizarre ice events in Southern Illinois. There is ice, there is a changing climate, which introduces more complex problems. And I'm going to let you take it away, Hanna, and tell us all about what's going on with sensible salting and how to protect our land and our water.
Yeah. She gave me a great introduction, but I'm Hanna Miller. I work for the Conservation Foundation. I work with our various watershed work groups on salty issues and helping them reduce chlorides. I help coordinate the Salt Smart Collaborative Program, which is, again, I'll talk all about how we fit into this. So just an introduction to TCF, just so that everyone knows who we are. We are a land trust up here in Northeast Illinois. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. This is our organization's mission. I really think about this as it kind of boiling down to me is that we save land and we save rivers. A lot of our work really helps to protect land and our local waterways. We primarily work here in Northeast Illinois. Our primary territories, or kind of what we call our core counties, are going to be DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will. And some of our work does take us outside of that into Cook, DeKalb, LaSalle, and Grundy counties. We're actually headquartered on a 60-acre organic vegetable farm in Naperville, which I think is kind of a unique place to be. It's pretty cool. I'm at the farm today, so it's always kind of a nice day when I get to come out here. We have a very local community focus. So we have our land programs to help connect others, to help preserve open space. But we also do education and outreach efforts, especially with youth, but also adult programming too, help build the education around the conservation efforts. Our organic vegetable farm produces healthy food for a lot of families here in the Naperville area, as well as in general around Northeast Illinois. But I kind of slot in our watershed programs, which is to help improve the local water quality in our area especially. From a land perspective, as we are a land trust, we've preserved over 35,000 acres, nearly 200 parcels, 45 conservation easements across 7 different counties. So we've got a lot of great land work. And how kind of I fit in is in that watershed groups. We work with 4 different watershed work groups in our area to help in partnership to help provide those professional staffing to those groups. But also we work in the Fox River watershed to help support some of their programming as well. So we do a lot with watershed work. It's pretty cool. I primarily come in kind of slot in with this chlorides issue. The Salt Smart Collaborative, which is one of our programs, grew out of one of the education outreach campaigns from these groups. It is an educational clearinghouse of resources and kind of help to fill the gaps for our various partners, be it for our public works folks or our snow and ice contractors, helping them fill the gaps from an education perspective. We have trainings, we do materials, we have a lot of different resources that come out of Salt Smart. And I'm going to talk through all of these resources today so that you kind of have an idea of what's available to you, because this is something that we want you to share our resources. We want you to blast them out and get them out there. The Conservation Foundation coordinates the Salt Smart Collaborative, but we have a lot of partners that we work with really closely on this issue. So why do we need to care about chlorides? Why should we care about salt? It really comes down to our rivers are getting saltier over time, and they've gotten saltier as kind of time has gone on. And so it really comes down to that good question of safety versus the environment. And it always comes down to this is what's your why? And the true answer here is that we can do both. It isn't necessarily just a question of we can't do anything about chlorides because of public safety. We actually can. We waste so much salt every storm. I'm sure you've seen roads caked in it, parking lots, sidewalks. But the good thing is that there are better practices out there, and these are best management practices. These are industry accepted practices that help us do better. And the good thing is that we help people to find their why. What are your reasons for being salt smart? My personal reason is because I care about our natural environment. I care about our local rivers. I care about our waterways. I want to help improve that. So my why is the natural environment. But for a lot of our public works organizations or other groups that are like contractors, they might be in it more to, from a contractor perspective, save money or make money. Whereas our public works folks, they want to provide safe surfaces to their communities. And so the good news here is that you can find all of these reasons, and you're going to get the benefits of all of them when you adopt these best practices. And that's where you guys come in to help us advocate for that. So where does chloride come from? When I'm talking about chloride, I'm talking about salt. We see that in road salt is definitely the biggest source of that here in Northeast Illinois, especially our urban areas. It's basically a less refined version of the same salt we put on food every day. We also see it in water softeners from agricultural sources like various fertilizers, dust suppressants. So it also is out in our more rural areas too. But the big one that we see time and time again here in Northeast Illinois is going to be our road salt. And salt is super effective at melting ice because as it dissolves and it splits up into the various ions of sodium chloride, it kind of disrupts those molecules from the ice and breaks them up, which is great, but then it stays in the water and it makes it much more difficult for it to actually be removed on the back end. So once it's in the water, it's very difficult to get back out and it's prohibitively expensive. And so as we keep adding salt to our environment, our rivers are getting increasingly saltier. Same with our groundwater. And so once salt gets into the waterways, it's incredibly difficult to remove this. It's prohibitively expensive for most places to do so. And so it only takes a single teaspoon of salt to contaminate 5 gallons of water, which is based on the EPA's water quality standard. And so I'm going to kind of help scale this up to put this in perspective for you. So you have that 5-gallon bucket, that single teaspoon of salt. If we say use a 50-pound bag of rock salt, which for I know a lot of folks is pretty standard during the winter time, that 50-pound bag of rock salt pollutes about 20,000 gallons of water, or about 1 professional hockey rink. I grew up in Minnesota, so to me, hockey's kind of my go-to standard here. And then you scale that up even further from like our roads perspective of thinking about 1 ton of salt. Well, 1 ton of salt puts about 800,000 gallons of water, or about 1 Olympic-sized swimming pool. And so when we talk to our roads folks and our parking lots and sidewalks folks, really a little bit goes a long way in the respect of we can really make a big difference in how much less salt we're using. Even if they use 1 less ton, that's 800,000 gallons of water that's not being polluted. So that kind of put that in perspective and try to think about it a little bit really does actually go a long way. There we go. And so as we see our concentrations go up during the winter time, it takes a really long time for them to come back down to background levels. And we know from local data that we've collected here in our region that chlorides can impact aquatic life at really low concentrations. And the time that they're really being that most impactful that we see this is in the spring and early summertime when they're in their vulnerable stages, as such as the eggs, the juvenile stages, the larval stages. And so we see these values, we would love to see them come down much quicker. I'd love to see this curve get depressed and kind of even scoot in a little bit if we can. And so by doing this, we're really trying to help to improve our local water quality by helping encourage people to adopt the practices that are going to help do that, to help reduce the impacts on our local waterways. We see this in our natural environment. So we see a lot of impacts from chlorides to our natural environment. It's just like when our snow melts and it's running down into our storm drains, it's picking up that salt melt water and getting into our waterways. And what we see is we see that impact to our fish, to our bugs. You'll see this picture kind of on your top corner up here of the salamander. That is actually taken from one of our partners' parking lots where they salted ahead of a storm, or they salted for a late frost. Salamanders emerged across the parking lot and unfortunately were desiccated by the salt. So we do definitely see these impacts to our natural environment. This picture up here on this part of the top corner up there, the Phragmites, giant reed, we see a lot more invasive salt tolerant species coming into soils that are, again, the native plants just aren't supported by the saltier soils, especially along roadways. So if you've ever driven along any of our highways here in Northeast Illinois and seen a lot of the giant reed, that's from the oversalting on our roadways. We see the impacts to the landscaping, to the vegetation, to our soils. There's some neat research coming out of Maryland about what's called freshwater salinization syndrome. If you're interested, I'm happy to get you connected to a webinar about that. But it's kind of treating salt as a whole system issue, where they're seeing more of that kind of that sodium that collects in the soils, displacing other pollutants per se, and helping to discharge that into the waterways where we don't want that to be. But we see it especially from a vegetation perspective of damaging plants and salt burn along sidewalks. I want to point out the pictures in the middle here. That's not a snow pile, that's dumped salt. So you see how by the end of 18 months later, that ground is just dead, it's gone. And so we're kind of dealing with a lot of these things when we're thinking about this landscaping and our vegetation. And I like to put this especially as kind of our bridge to the impacts that matter, especially to our public works staff, where they're concerned about the cost to replace a lot of, say, their bridges, their roads, their vehicles, equipment. But our park staff that might be concerned about their damages to their facility, they might be more concerned about the trash can replacement at their parks, light post, hand railings. We might see people concerned about the damage to their sliding doors, interior floors, concrete. So whatever your reason why is, you're going to see these good benefits to having less damage in general across all of it. And when we think about what the true cost of salt is, and thinking about how it goes beyond just what the cost to purchase a bag of salt and have someone put that out, so your snow and ice management, what else comes into that cost? Thinking about the landscape repairs, thinking about the janitorial costs, the repairs to your buildings from salt damage, and then thinking about kind of scaling that up. Our wastewater treatment plant upgrades as chlorides make it into regulatory permits of how they have to meet more of their more stringent standards. What about our infrastructure cost replacement? And what about that damage to the environment? And when we really think about what that true cost of salt is, it's roughly been estimated across various studies to be about $1,700 for kind of that low end stuff, that little things like turf repair, up to about $17,000 per ton for your bigger issues, your damage to the environment, wastewater treatment plant upgrades. And so thinking about this from a cost perspective of this really does actually kind of come down to making a bigger difference, both from we're protecting the environment and saving some money on that side of that damage. And so how did we get here? Over the last 30 years plus, expectations have increased to unsustainable levels. Bare pavement policies have been adopted. People expect to be able to drive like normal down the highway in the middle of a snowstorm. And so people start to equate the crunching sound of salt with safe surfaces. They start to put down salt for the excess, for the liability. We start to see politics overrule snow and ice plans. And so really what it comes down to is that more salt does not necessarily mean more safe. And there's a lot that we can do to actually reduce the amount of salt. One thing we hear from folks when we talk to our plow drivers, we talk to organizations about this is, but this is the way we've always done it. When in reality, we're not out with a horse-drawn snow roller anymore. And we really like to put this in perspective that technology when it comes to snow and ice has really pushed forward, just the same as we're not using fire to light our homes anymore. We're using modern day LED light bulbs. We're not carrying around these giant brick cell phones. Folks are purchasing newer smartphones nowadays. And so technology and knowledge has advanced. And so we have a lot of these great practices that people can turn to. So we can do better. We can use the best practices. Everyone has a role to play, no matter what your role is, whether that you being a land trust and being an advocate for clean water, clean land, or if you have connections with your public works staff where they have a role to play in how much salt they're being put out. So all of these good practices really do play a role in reducing the amount of salt. And these are industry accepted best practices. I'm going to talk through some of the basics of what these practices are, give you a good rundown so you have a good understanding of it. From a planning perspective, having a plan is huge for our organizations that are doing winter operations. This really gives them kind of a guide to follow. They're making intentional decisions based on conditions, pavement temperatures, their needed levels of service, and what actions and practices they need to use. We encourage calibration wherever possible because calibrating equipment is a big piece of this. If you can document and verify how much material is being discharged, you can control what comes out of the back of your equipment, you can control what comes out of your truck, you can control how much material you are saving or how much material you are wasting. This is a big step for a lot of our folks just to get a handle on how much they're actually spreading. And I want to give an example from across the border in Wisconsin. This is an example of equipment calibration where they ran their truck at what they thought was 300 pounds per lane mile, when in reality, it was actually spreading 850 pounds per lane mile. So that's pretty significant. Once they calibrated their equipment, now they were actually spreading 300 pounds per lane mile. And so that 500 plus pounds per lane mile, that goes a really long way in how much salt we're saving versus wasting. So this is a big step for a lot of our public works folks, parking lot sidewalks folks to calibrate equipment. Clearing snow with mechanical methods is a huge, big step. This is the primary tool. You want to clear as much snow off the parking lot, off the sidewalk, off the roadway before applying those de-icers, because then you'll need to use less. You're not trying to burn snow and ice with de-icers. We encourage following guidance based on pavement temperature and conditions, actually taking the time to measure this. You'll see here in this kind of the sensor box down the bottom corner down there where the air temperature is reporting at 3 degrees, the pavement is actually 31. That's a pretty big significant difference and can make a big difference with how much salt you're actually using when you're making decisions based on the pavement temperatures and conditions for which material you might choose, but also what application rate you might use and any other winter maintenance strategies you might be turning to. So this can be a really big tool that can help really make a big difference. And what it comes down to is they're making those decisions to use the right material for the right conditions, applying that material at the right time. They're being strategic about the materials that they're choosing to use, and they're following application rate guidance. They're not just blindly putting salt down on the road. There's rhyme and reason to this. They're making decisions based on the conditions that they're being faced with and the pavement temperatures that they're choosing that they have in their on their pavement. So they're making good decisions and intentional decisions. We always get the question, what about beet juice? Myth or fact? This is a confusing thing to a lot of people. We talk about this all the time. The question always comes up. Myth or fact? Beet juice is an alternative to road salt. I'd love if you drop your thoughts in the comments box for me, in the chat box. I'd love to hear if people think myth or fact. Be great. We can make this a little interactive on you. Let's see. See, partly fact. I like that you want this to be a fact. It's great. So when we're thinking about this, it is a myth. Beet juice and other carbohydrates are actually an additive to the road salt. They're an additive to the de-icer to improve that cold weather performance. They're not necessarily an alternative. I like to think about beet juice kind of like putting a can of regular Coke in the freezer versus a can of Diet Coke. That sugars help keep it a little crunchier longer. The same thing with like ice cream. That extra sugar in that ice cream can really help keep it smoother longer instead of freezing solid faster. And so that beet juice, that extra sugar can make a big difference. Also, because it is sticky, it helps the road salt stick to the pavement surface a little bit better, keeping it where we want it to go, not having it bounce off quite as much. So it has its benefits. But it is a myth. We can't use it as a true alternative to road salt. And with liquids in mind, like beet juice, when bare pavement is the target, liquids really help us to get there much faster. We see a lot more communities turning to liquids because they can achieve results quicker, but also because it saves on a lot of materials. Liquids on a whole use less total materials than using a dry rock salt product. So I want to share this example where how much salt might you need for 1,000 square feet? You'd use about 1 gallon of brine, about 2.3 pounds of salt, give or take a little bit. Versus if, say, we were to follow the instructions on the back of most bags of salt for the same area, we'd be using over 27 pounds. So that's a huge difference and a big savings. And when we talk about this and we look at how much salt really we're saving and wasting, this is one way using liquids can really make a big difference. We see communities pre-treating with liquids. This is a technical term called anti-icing, where they're applying the liquids to the pavement surface to kind of melt from the bottom up. They're helping to kind of make that bond, prevent that bond from forming so that the snow and ice doesn't stick to the pavement surface. It's just like when you make eggs in a frying pan, you're putting that butter down first, that oil and fat in the pan to help prevent that eggs from sticking. This is what anti-icing does. And then because you're not having to like plow off hard pack, you're not having to use quite as much de-icers, you're saving a lot of material because you're not applying as much when you're de-icing that roadway surface again. We encourage communities to get that salt wet. Use brine to actually get their salt wet ahead of applying it on the roadways. We see this being done either by treating a stockpile or spraying it directly from their equipment. But this graphic here showing that 15% off the roadway versus 2% off the roadway. The study was done out of Michigan, and they showed that by getting that salt wet, they were actually only having about 4%, 2% on each side, showing how kind of bouncing off the roadway versus when they were applying dry salt, having over 30% bounce off. And that means they can use a lot less because now they're targeting and keeping that salt where they want it to go on the roadway surface, not necessarily having it bounce off into landscaping and into the curb line where it's not going to do anyone any good. We also see a lot of communities turning to liquids as a de-icer from an innovative practice, something that, again, they're choosing to kind of get creative with their operations. Liquids as a de-icer is a fantastic way to kind of use liquids because that liquid is dissolved, that salt is pre-dissolved. It actually starts working quicker. Then we have to wait for that salt to dissolve into solution. And because a lot of times when we're plowing off all that moisture, by adding brine back, you're putting some of that moisture back on the surface to help that salt work. So this is a really kind of cool, innovative practice. We've started seeing more communities adopt this, as well as even private contractors adopt this. This is actually one of the contractors that we worked closely with for the Salt Smart program, using liquids as a de-icer. And it's a pretty cool practice when you get to see it when it's actually working. It's also about properly storing materials, putting those materials under permanent cover on impermeable surfaces. We want to prevent that runoff from happening. That might be tarping salt piles, that might be putting them in a permanent salt dome. From our parking lots perspective, that might be putting it in a roll-off with a cover. That might be putting it in a shipping container. That might be having your plastic storage tank have a lockout tagout on it so that it just can't be opened, but having that liquids on site. So some good options, but keeping those under cover to prevent that runoff from those salt piles. But as well as good communication. And that's one of the things where land trusts, you have an opportunity to do this. You have a way to help us get this message out. Good communication really helps get buy-in. People that are aware to walk more carefully, drive more carefully during the wintertime, they're going to be more cautious. So we can get this word out, but also help to educate on these good practices that our communities are doing, that are using liquids. Help them to get this message out there so people are informed during winter weather. It's also about getting the staff buy-in. So just the same as those folks that are actually doing these practices, we want to help them understand what these good practices are. So we offer training through the Salt Smart Collaborative. We developed a training for both roads and parking lots and sidewalks. These are open to anyone across all of Illinois. We've had folks from Champaign participate, Rockford participate, not just here in Northeast Illinois, but it's the bulk of our folks that participate. Please blast these out, get these shared. These are really great ways to help encourage your roads folks, parking lots and sidewalks folks to do these good practices. We also have a variety of resources on these good practices on our website to help these folks get started. So they take our training, we get them connected to these good resources that can help get them started. I've got here the example of our calibration how-to videos. I've tried to put up as many of different types of equipment as we can up here so that they're all in one place, one kind of centralized, easy to find location, so that if folks have questions about how to calibrate their equipment, they can just go and find a video and follow along. Pause, replay as many times as they need. So we've got a lot of good resources up here, both handouts, technical documents, and videos and things to help get folks started using these good practices. It's also important to remind folks that are hiring contractors to choose people that are using the best practices. Organizations like SIMA, which is a Snow and Ice Management Association, they are kind of a private contractor association group. They have trainings and certifications for snow and ice, and specifically for these good practices. We started our own here in Illinois through the Salt Smart group, through Salt Smart Collaborative, calling it Salt Smart Certified. Folks that participate in our training certify that they're using these good practices. We're giving them resources, helping them out to help keep them using these good practices. We're working on getting this program launched and off the ground and running. We have some folks that are started with this and have certified, they are Salt Smart certified. We're still working on getting that up and running. So please help to share, get this out there. Our program, the Salt Smart Certified program, we developed both a manual in English and in Spanish, which was really important piece of this program to help get this message out there to those that weren't native English speakers. But we developed this program with a steering committee of park district staff, contractors, environmental folks, with a grant from the Illinois IEPA to help develop this program. We put together training, the certification program, as well as a property manager's booklet, something that kind of covered the basics of what these practices are, but also help get these folks connected to the resources they need to ask for these good practices from their contractors. When I talk to folks about why being Salt Smart certified is an important piece, it assures their facility users that they're knowledgeable on these good practices, and they're actually using them, that these good practices benefit their facilities. We list everyone that is Salt Smart certified on the Salt Smart website, so we do have to keep that updated, and we are working on keeping the resources updated for those organizations to help give them access to good resources, like this window cling here that we've got to help them advertise at their facilities that you are Salt Smart certified, you're using the good practices. We also have connections through CIMA to good resources for RFPs to help property managers, help folks ask for these good practices. If this is something you're interested in or want to get folks connected to, just let me know, and I can help get you connected to these good resources. I also like to remind folks that these practices may be done on the road scale, the large scale parking lots and sidewalks, but you can absolutely scale them down at home too. So the big thing being Salt Smart in your community is to help your plow drivers do their job better. That means when it snows, if you can, move your car off the street, help your plow drivers get to your street faster. If, say, you have curbside collection on, it snows on garbage day, put your garbage can behind the curb line so that plows can get through easier. Fix leaning mailboxes. But it's also about not crowding the plow, giving our plow drivers space to do their jobs. We really encourage you to never pass a plow truck. If you can avoid it, the roads are gonna be so much better behind the plow truck than it is in front of it. So let the plow drivers do their jobs, give them space to do that. But also being Salt Smart at home. So thinking about, again, clearing snow and ice with mechanical methods, shovels, brooms, snow blowers, all work fantastic. And then thinking about if you need to apply salt. So only applying it if you need it, but then where you need it. So thinking about where people walk and where cars drive. If you have a sidewalk along the side of your house where you don't get much foot traffic, do you really need to put salt down? Or might some sand for some occasional traction work really well there? So kind of thinking about where you need it and if you need it. But then also one thing I keep seeing brought up time and time again is now, if there's no snow on the ground, but there's a lot of salt in our sidewalks. So going out there, sweeping that up, cleaning it up, saving it for the next time so that it's not being washed down our storm drains and washed into our waterways when it rains like it's going to do this afternoon. So how can you help us get this word out? How can you as a land trust help blast the Salt Smart message out there? We have outreach resources that are available to you that you're welcome to download, use, share, do whatever you'd like with them. I'd love to see them being used and getting out there. If you have ideas for resources as well, reach out, because I want to create things that people are actually going to be using. So if you've got content messages you'd love to see more of, just let us know. We want to help get this message out. We have videos and graphics about those key messages. So these where should you salt graphics, but also some neat videos that you're welcome to share, how more isn't always better. Also how you can do brine at home. So again, scaling some of these roads practices down to doing at home. We've got some neat videos of how to do that. We have a ton of various social media posts that you're welcome to borrow and use and post out there about targeting these key messages around salt. Things like both the environmental issue, but also about anti-icing and brine practices, helping and get the buy-in for these good practices from our communities so that as more of our communities are turning to liquids, using less dry salt, people aren't seeing that crunch as much and they are not necessarily, they're ready to understand what this is. So we've got a lot of good resources that you're welcome to use and share. You can also share directly from our social media. I will sound kind of like a YouTuber out there of like, subscribe, share, and follow. So help us get this message out there as much as you can. You're welcome to share directly from our social media. I know some of our posts get a bit more traffic than others, but it would be great if you can help us blast this message out. I wanted to quick play. We got a new reel here as well that we posted recently, and I wanted to share this one with you. Hopefully the sound comes through.
Did you know that every time we salt our roads, we might be salting our rivers too? When we spread salt on roads, parking lots, and sidewalks, it doesn't just disappear when the snow melts. Instead, a lot of that salt gets washed into storm drains like these. And these drains lead directly into our local rivers and streams. Over the years, this salt gradually makes the water saltier, and that's bad news for aquatic life like fish, macroinvertebrates, and aquatic plants that can't survive in salty water. But don't worry, we can start to reverse the trend by being salt smart. Next time it snows, grab a shovel first to remove as much snow as possible. Then scatter salt only where you need it, like high-traffic, icy areas. You really don't need a mountain of salt to melt ice and create safe surfaces. A little goes a long way.
Thank you.
So we try to get our social media up and out there so that you can share it. Again, we're really trying to get this message blast out there, building a community around this. So the more folks that you can help us do that, that would be fantastic. We have blog posts that you're welcome to use in websites, newsletters, help get this message out there. We have it on a variety of topics, both on the environmental issue with salt, but also on all of the good practices. So please share these out there, use them in your newsletters, use them on your website. If you, again, see topics you'd like to see out there, please let me know. I'd love to share that. We have posters that you're welcome to use and download. So we have a new one for this year, about 10 tips to help us winter together, things people can do in their community. But also we have posters about brine and loving the lines. We have a park district that we work with that puts this poster up every year in their entryways at their rec centers, because it's, again, getting the buy-in for the fact that they're not using any crunchy salt anymore. They're only using liquids. And so people are now expecting to see that, and they're learning about it by saying, lose the crunch, love the lines. If you are here in Northeast Illinois, we have a Salt Smart and You exhibit. This was put together with partners at the Northwest Water Planning Alliance, as well as several local area libraries, with kind of a 8-panel set. It is in English and in Spanish. One side's English, one side's Spanish. And it's been a great tool to help us get this message out there. We've had it go around to a variety of communities, libraries, park districts have borrowed it. So if you're at all interested in this and you're here in Northeast Illinois, I would love to get you connected to it. We have handouts for residents that we try to pass out with the exhibit as well, in addition to passing these out through our various communities. They're really great tools to help get kind of the message out there into the hands of the residents. Our Salt Smart Cup has instructions for how much salt to actually use. So we try to, again, get this out for folks to understand what the message is. We recently also updated our bookmark so that it is now one side English, one side Spanish. We're working on getting more and more of our resources into Spanish as much as we can. So updating some of our social media to be in both English and Spanish, as well as our posters. And then we also have the Salt Smart and You exhibit that is also English and Spanish. We've also worked really closely with partners at the National Great Rivers Research and Education Center to help expand their education program called Winter Chloride Watchers. This is a really cool volunteer program that is a citizen science program to help get people more aware of the salt issue. So we provide training and education to these volunteers about why salt is an issue, but also the good things that are being done about this. That way they can help to kind of get the message through that they're learning more about the salt issue. And we're using it as an education tool. So volunteers go out, collect and report results back to us about chloride. They get some neat information about chlorides in a volunteer email once a month. But it's been a great program to help educate a lot of people on chlorides. Just this last year, we have from 23 to 24, our first year participating with this with National Great Rivers. We had 123 volunteers submit over 1,200 chloride samples across 188 sites in 17 counties in Illinois. So it is an Illinois-wide program, which is pretty neat. This year alone, we have over 210 volunteers participating with almost 300 sites. So that I'm pretty excited to see. More volunteers are participating. As of last Tuesday, when I last checked our results, we were at over 560 samples. I know we've got a lot of waterways that have been frozen this month, so kind of seeing a little dip in samples reported, but I expect as we kind of hit some of the warmer months, we'll start seeing folks pick that back up and keep reporting samples back to us. So I want to kind of wrap this up a little bit here with how can you help as a land trust? How can you help us get this message out? The big thing here is help us get this word out. Use our resources, share our education outreach materials with any of your connections that you have, be that with your local communities, your libraries, your HOAs. Get some of our resources in their hands to help them be salt smart. Share our workshops. Our workshops are for Illinois. They're for all of Illinois, regardless of where you're located, where your land trust is. So we want to help you get connected to your local folks, share our workshops. If that's contractors, that's great. If that's park districts, that's also great. If that's roads folks, also great. We want to get this knowledge in the hands of the people that can do something good about it. And if you have a group that's interested in training, you can get a group together. Let's chat. I would love to be able to get this training in front of as many people as we can. So if you want to host a training, we're happy to help you do that. So let's get connected and figure out how we can help get this message out. We really want your help to advocate for clean water and help to reduce the amount of salt people are putting down. So I wanted to quickly share website one more time, saltsmart.org, that way you can get connected to our resources. And if you have questions, here's my contact information. You're welcome to reach out at any time. I love talking salt. I do it all day long. I know I talk fast. I was about to be an hour. I'm here at about 35 minutes. But definitely reach out with questions. I'm happy to talk salt with you anytime, get you connected to resources, get you connected with people that are doing these good practices so that you can also learn more as well if you have folks that have questions about it too.
Hannah, thank you so much. And we do have some time for conversation and questions right now. So if you want to come off mute, you can come on camera, and we'll have a conversation. I'm really interested in learning about what your organizations, and we've got some variety here. Our small but mighty group here representing very different organizations. And so I'm curious if you're doing anything surrounding Salt Smart and practicing best management to protect the land and water in your areas. So I welcome anyone to come on off and share. Go ahead.
If that's cool.
Yeah.
I have a question, but just to introduce myself, Gerardo Trujillo, Hannah, I've met you before.
Yeah.
And Cynthia, I think we've met maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yep,
think
yep.
we have.
Yes, we have.
But I am the landscaping specialist at Openlands. I'm a certified arborist. My work is with the landscaping industry, so contractors. I really admire the work you guys are doing with the salt stuff. I think it's a phenomenal model for how to share out and create a lot of content on a specific change, actionable change that we can see an industry do. I think that's huge. I am trying to um, figure out ways to gather audiences of contractors to maybe,
Yeah.
bring them in front of sessions like this, and then also create other types of informational resources for other things that Open Lands feels is sustainable within like the landscape. So using native species versus cultivated varieties, or just thinking about how the landscaping work that gets done impacts um, our waterways. I think that's a huge nut to crack, and for sure, seeing the work that Hannah's been putting together is kind of like the bar has been set. So trying to
We're here to help you. So I would love to
yeah
get connected with you and talk more about how we can do something with contractors, because I think that's a great way to help get this in front of them. The neat thing about it is that the contractors that we've talked with and worked with, especially like the money savings part of this, if they
yes
can use less materials, charge a similar amount for their service, they're making more money. We have contractors that we've worked closely with that that's their reason why.
yep
And it's kind of neat to think about and look at, because they learn about the environmental benefits and they're like, oh, cool, we're actually getting all this other benefits. what do you mean I don't have to like replace my turf every single winter? What do you mean I can like support my use less
Hmm.
material? They get
Yeah.
excited about it. And that I think is really neat to see.
Yeah.
And so I would love to chat more and see what we can do to help get this message in front of contractors more.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, that leads to a question I had. Is there like a practical portion of the training where like you teach crew members how to do the mixing and then how to do the application and maybe even like what
The
um
calibrating, maybe.
yeah, calibrating, what kind of equipment they could use, even uh this is where it gets tricky, right? But like often what I hear from contractors is like, well, how do I make money out of this, right? Like, or even like, business models based on how does an operation like this work, how to scale it up, and that kind of information for someone to really see like a pathway to be able to, financially gain from doing this best practice.
Yeah,
That's the best,
we
it's best incentive we can create, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In our training, we have videos from contractors, local contractors that are actually doing this, providing their experiences. Because obviously these are busy folks. We did this via video instead of having them always be there in person. When we've done the in-person trainings, we've often sometimes included, especially with our roads trainings, included facility tours if we're at someone's public works facility, to help to kind of introduce people to these equipment, to these practices. When we did this training in Lake County with their roads crews, we did a calibration workshop as well as part of the training. So we try to incorporate some of the hands-on stuff. With our virtual, we have to kind of turn to videos, which again, it's hit or miss of how well that comes across. I know it's worked really well though. People have responded really well to that. But it is definitely good feedback to hear that that is needed and we need more of it, because I'm happy to help to kind of see how we could work something like that in, especially to help answer some of those good questions that you're asking to help get more of this message out there to others. I know that was some of the good feedback that we got from our trainings this year, people wanting some of that more hands-on, wanting more of the kind of the practical, how do I actually do this? How do I use this? And so definitely, I like your feedback. I like you're asking these questions because we want to help make these resources useful to people.
And of course, saving money is making money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a great intersection of protecting the environment and also and makes economic sense.
Mhm.
And I think more and more there are examples of that intersection happening. And in order to really protect our environment on a high level, those examples need to come out and be highlighted more because that's real. I'm really curious, Hannah, have you heard from anybody else around the state? I wish I had someone from Southern Illinois here. We had Heartlands on. They're pretty far south, but they had to jump off. I'm just curious, obviously they don't usually get the ice that they got this year, and that kind of goes to our climate is changing and expect the unexpected.
Yeah, we did this train. We did our parking lots and sidewalks training with a group of park district staff last year, and we had staff from all over Illinois when we participated with that one. Our roads training, we actually got some folks from Champaign as well. So it is open to all folks around Illinois. So getting in front of you guys is great because I know a lot of our land trusts have connections and are not. They're all over the state. So if you guys can help push this out there and help encourage them to attend trainings, that would be fantastic. As it's just coming to learn about it is step number one.
Yep.
Once they start learning about it, we start having these good conversations. We get them connected to folks that are doing these good practices to help answer those practical questions. And then we start to see more people take this up.
Yeah.
I know a lot of our roads crews, when they start using these practices for the first time, it's new. And so it can be a little daunting at first of how do I even do this? How do I get started? And so where we can help folks make those good connections with another community that's using these or another park district, that can make a big difference in someone's success with these practices.
Mhm. Yeah, and our conservation land trust, and we had a forest preserve on. They jumped off. We all work so hard to protect our natural areas, which includes land, which affects water, of course. We all live in a watershed, and when we're putting human-made interventions down, whether it's salt or herbicides, there's an impact on that very land that we're trying to protect. So, to me, this is really another issue that's not about convenience or, it really has true impact in a negative way on our natural world. And for our conservation community, obviously that's like a really big message. But again, that it also helps our municipalities save money and our counties. So I wanted to ask another question, unless as someone else does, Jill, Sandy, Your Honor, if you have any. But I'm wondering if what kind of feedback you get from our villages and our cities around the state, because this seems like a no-brainer. And are things happening? Are things moving in the right direction? Nutrient runoff is not moving in the right direction. It's increasing. How are we doing with the salt?
On a whole, we see these trends take a long time to start seeing results because every winter is different. There's no winter that's the same. So they're going to be treating different storms. They might be treating them similarly, but we see it kind of fluctuate a little bit. On a whole, we are trending downwards as more people are adopting these. It takes time to see these results. But we've had communities that have adopted these practices that takes time to implement them into their organizations. But we've had communities that have reduced their salt use by over 50%, which is pretty significant in the long term of when we come back to that kind of that example of the swimming pools of how much salt we're really saving. When you have a community that might be using three or 5,000 tons every year and they've cut that in half, that's huge. That's pretty significant. So we definitely have seen it come back down. I'm excited to say it is slowly trending down. It just takes time to see these results because again, every winter is different. It takes time for organizations to adopt these good practices.
Yeah.
But we have been seeing it. We see more communities turning to it. I see more people talking about it, more people pointing this out that say, hey, I know what those lines on the road now mean. I know those are there as a good thing. I know we're using less salt.
That's excellent. Yeah, and I had heard about the chloride watchers. I was thinking about doing that because I've got a creek right behind my house that is a tributary to the Fox River. And so I might have to do that because hey, it doesn't take long to go, grab a little water and send it in.
No, you don't even need to send it in. You are the
Oh,
cool thing about the program.
I measure it myself and send
Yeah.
the data in. Yeah.
Yeah, we provide the test strips to volunteers for that program, both from us and from the National Great Rivers folks who help to supply those test strips. And those volunteers measure it and report it back to us. So we start people in the fall for that program so they can collect kind of a whole winter's worth of data into the spring. So I'll make sure to get you connected to when we have that so you guys can help share that out to volunteers so that we can help identify sites and find good places for volunteers to go.
Yeah, that would be great because we have an amazing all of our conservation organizations have amazing volunteer groups, and things do slow down a little bit in the winter. So when they want to keep getting out there, and well, of course now there are burns happening in the winter, bizarrely. But this is another way to have that volunteer base stay active during the winter months. So on my volunteer time, I'm on the board of Friends of the Fox River, and so I'm sure that you've connected with Friends of the Fox River on all this. But that would be another group to come and do the presentation if you haven't done that already.
Yeah, I was actually at the Fox River Summit last year. Our counterpart in Wisconsin Saltwise, Alice and their staff person up there, her and I did a co-presentation for the Fox River Summit last year about the chlorides issue. It's one of those that it's an interesting one that we're all working on this together. We're coming at it a little bit differently. She's working on it a little bit differently than we are, but we're all seeing good results and getting connected to communities and making a difference. It's
great. Yeah,
yeah.
I was there.
Good.
And I've got March 13th on my calendar. Any other questions or conversation that you'd like to bring up? I do like the whole beet thing, and I put partly fact because it was kind of a thing for a little while there. But even if you add some beet, to salt that reduces your salt, which is good, but I bet it's expensive.
It's just like any other product that they're choosing to use. And so that's what it comes down to. But it's one of those where it can make a big difference of how much salt they're having to use and how much total material.
Yeah.
So we definitely do see it. We see it much more used in roads than we do parking lots and sidewalks. That just comes down to kind of the staining issue. The color can sometimes, and people not as much of a fan of it getting tracked into buildings quite as much. So we usually see it more so used in roads than we see it used in parking lots and
Yeah,
sidewalks.
that's true. Well, thank you. There are no other questions. I'll let everyone go early. Oh, actually, I did think of something for our broader audience that's going to be receiving this. Can you talk a little bit about brine for those who are not familiar with that? And then I promise, because I knew there was a little something else I wanted to ask you about. And then we'll
Yes. So when I mentioned liquids in the presentation, I'm talking about salt brine, which is liquid salt. It works best at a concentration of about 23.3%.
Okay.
So our roads crews are targeting that specific concentration so that it's most effective. It's a pretty neat thing with how the liquids are used. And because it's being again sprayed on that pavement surface, it's not bouncing off, it's staying where we want it to go. We see a lot more communities turning to it as they're getting kind of ramped up with these best practices. It's cool to see more and more communities turning to liquids, and that's when I'm talking about liquids, I'm talking about salt brine especially.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I think we've got some communities, maybe Woodstock out in McHenry County, that was kind of early on using brine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see a lot more communities turning to it now, which I'm really just excited to see that there are more and more folks that are adopting it. And we have communities out there that are helping each other use it. So they can sell to their local park districts. They might sell to their local school districts. They might provide it to a community to say, hey, you want to try a little bit, bring a bucket, fill it up, give it a go. So we have communities that are supporting each other as well, which is kind of neat to see, to help get more and more buy-in around brine and around liquids.
Yeah, and I love your message about around your home, sweep it up and use it again if it's sitting around there. I see piles of salt all over. So that's a great message. You can sweep it up and use it again.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And okay, well, thank you. And thank you too for the information about Phragmites and the connection to that. That's always the problem when invasive species have that tolerance. And you do see that along the roadsides, and that connection was really stuck out for me.
Yeah, it's your reason why, and some folks have different
Yes.
reasons. And
Mhm.
it's one of those that, especially from like a land perspective, when we're thinking about protecting our land, reducing salt can really help to protect our native species and help support soils that are good for that.
Yes. Well, that is a wonderful, perfect note to end on with our conservation community. And thank you, Hannah, so much. And thank you for being here, everyone. And this will be posted on our YouTube channel and we'll e-blast it out. So you'll be able to rewatch and share out. And we look forward to sharing your materials too.